you doing to my pots and pans?
Now don't henpeck the boy. Next trip into town, I'll buy you a whole bunch of new pots and pans. Red, up the hill and quick, boy. We're getting raided.
I'm coming, Pa!
The kid's down by the river. Go get him.
When you hear Red Dead today, you're most likely to first think about Rockstar's 2018 release, Red Dead Redemption 2, that blew players away with its vast world, compelling story, and authentic portrayal of its time period. Before we begin, please consider subscribing and enabling all notifications by clicking the bell icon. With that out of the way, let's get started. You can't be blamed for having that association. RDR2 is a triumph of a game, but aside from that, Red Dead Redemption from the 7th generation was also quite the showstopper for similar reasons. So if you're a little behind the times, you could easily think of that game first. Even further back though, is a game that lots of Red Dead fans have simply forgotten about, and is often considered to be highly underrated by its fans, Red Dead Revolver.
Hey, Pa, where'd you get that?
Isn't she a beaut?
Yeah! Can I hold it?
She's one of a pair, only two in the whole world.
Where's the other one?
My partner Griff has it. We made him up special to symbolize our newfound wealth.
Can I try it out?
One day this fine weapon will be yours. But for now, why don't you take my old pistol? Go on down to the river and practice while I give your ma her gift.
Angel Studios is a name you probably don't remember, as they haven't really existed for quite a while after being fully absorbed into Rockstar around the dawn of the 6th generation of gaming consoles. Of the many projects that the folks on that team got the chance to tinker with over the years, a spaghetti western was one that was near and dear to their hearts, despite several revisions and a rather chaotic development cycle full of starts and stops. Red Dead Revolver would ultimately launch on the PlayStation 2 and original Xbox, skipping the GameCube and the ill-fated Dreamcast, as many bigger third-party games from that generation did. Still, the game would turn out pretty good as an unapologetic love letter to that Clint Eastwood style of mid-1800s Western storytelling. Lots of tense shootouts, horse riding, and faithful iterations of many character tropes of the genre. It seemed to have a lot going for it at the time. But with it being the first of 3 games in the series, and arguably not even canonically related to the most recent 2, it has sadly fallen to the wayside in many respects. But does it deserve to?
Well, I didn't know.
You holding out on us,
No!
old man?
I
What the hell are you looking at? Fill 'em full of lead.
Drop the gun, you...
As stated, Red Dead Revolver is widely considered to be in its own universe, and separate from Redemption and Redemption 2. That said, its spiritual relationship to the more recent 2 games is unavoidable. Without Revolver, it's tough to say if we would have ever gotten the Redemption games, so fans of those more recent games owe at least a little something to Revolver for that alone. But even more importantly, it does its own thing in a lot of ways that do indeed make it feel like a different experience from Redemption and Redemption 2. It's a bit less serious, with purposefully on-the-nose dialogue delivery and somewhat sillier elements like throwable vials of acid and excessive film grain, giving the game's cutscenes a deliberately grindhousey look. It lands well and makes the game stand out from a lot that was out at the time, and perhaps even more so nowadays.
Mister, you could really use a hot bath and some fresh clothes.
Where most action-adventure games are so much more focused on realism and believability. Playing the game in 2021 is quite a trip for that. Characters and locations are all designed with a similar focus on stylization over realism, and it adds to the overall experience in kind. Bulkier characters having giant heads, some exaggerated mutton chops and mustaches, and other disproportional characteristics make the characters have more in common artistically with what you might find in Team Fortress 2 than Red Dead Redemption 2. At the time, it might have seemed out of touch with what many gamers wanted, but that was the price the game seemed more than willing to pay. But aside from design and visual aesthetics, the gameplay of Red Dead Revolver holds up surprisingly well when compared to its two big brothers. The movement and aiming is responsive, and the game's handful of set pieces can still get the blood pumping in all the right ways. Shootouts are fun, despite the slow-mo duels not making a whole lot of sense sometimes, and the occasional glitch. The gameplay has much more going for it than not. Marking enemies during the game's many shootouts and watching them all get taken down at once is just as satisfying as it ever was. The story is also quite strong, despite its apparent lack of dedication to any one tone. The line between a game's story being unfocused and versatile is often a blurry one and subjective, but what it really comes down to is the game's intention. If a game doesn't have any apparent intention of being one thing or another, it can quickly fall apart as unsatisfying and poorly paced. But if it's all over the place on purpose and shifts around to different tones in a planned, gratifying way, it can really make the game shine. Red Dead Revolver is much more on that side of the spectrum, with many funny and, at times, outright ridiculous moments sprinkled into a generally serious story about revenge for the main character. It never spends too much or too little time in either comedy or seriousness to betray itself, like a lot of games who attempt similar balances do. And for that, it easily remains a totally defensible way to spend the 10 or so hours needed to see it through.
Please, can you help me? You gotta help my pa. There's no doctor left in this town.
The closest doctor's in Brimstone. Sheriff Bartlett might offer you a handsome reward if you can get me there.
Which is why it's purchasable for PS4 and PS5 right now as a digital port on the PlayStation Store, and has likely paid for the cost of putting it there many times over by now. Red Dead Revolver was not received nearly as well as its successors would be though, with most mainstream game critics of its time giving it mediocre to slightly better than mediocre scores, and a few even going lower than that. Red Dead Revolver might be a bit of a shock to those who are coming off of either of the two Redemption games. But that is really a strength for the game rather than a weakness. The stylistic differences Revolver has from the Redemption games actually gives you more of a reason to play it in 2021. If it was just a weaker, older version of what RDR2 did in 2018, it wouldn't have nearly as much appeal today as it currently does. But given that it actually offers up its completely own flavor of the Western outlaw genre, there's really no reason for fans of that sort of thing to pass on it. Is it underrated? Well, perhaps so. The PS2 era was one in which games were getting significantly more realistic, and lots of gamers were really looking for games that took advantage of that. Metal Gear Solid 3 and Splinter Cell were massive hits because they did that. But Red Dead Revolver went its own way, just like the characters that populate its story. But nowadays, I think it holds its value quite well as an experience worth checking out. Its light-hearted take on the genre feels even rarer now than it did then, and for those looking for something a little different, you could do a lot worse.
Now this here's a robbery. Nobody plays hero, nobody dies.
And that brings us to the end of the video. A quick request: we upload new videos every single day, and if you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing. It really helps us out. Also, don't forget to enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon so that you can receive daily video updates. Thanks for watching.